is Dan Rome, and as Andrea mentioned, I'm the author of a series of books, the first of which was called The Back of the Napkin. Each of these books is around the power of clear communication. And this is really the center of my career for the last 25 years is working with business executives, whether at large organizations or at small organizations, at startups, to be able to more effectively understand what is in our own minds, and then to be more powerfully and effectively able to convey those ideas to other people by simply using the power of vision. That is to say, the power of our own visual mind. And that has been my passion in my career for my entire life. And I've about a year ago published my latest book, which is called The Pop-Up Pitch. And some of the lessons that we're going to talk about today come from that book. To give you a little bit of context, I think one of the most important drawings right now would just be to say, if you think about the state of the world right now, there's a lot going on and it can look very complicated and very frightening. And I would say this, in an uncertain and scary world, I truly believe that visual storytelling is very clarifying, it is very reassuring, and most importantly, it's very, very human. And what I mean by that is more than ever, we need to be able to connect with each other at a human level, whether we're talking about business, whether we're talking about our own individual lives, whether we're talking about our aspirations or our fears. I think one of the things that's really powerful is for those of us who have the ability to take advantage of the power of our visual mind is we can see the complexity of the world and we can take a step back and we can maybe get a better view of what's going on. And if we have a colleague or someone around us who says, I'm scared, I don't know what's going on, it's too complicated, we're going to be some of the people who can take a look at this and be, by virtue of being able to communicate clearly and draw it out, say, I have you, it's okay. Come with me. I'll show you how we're going to make this work out. So that's really at the broadest level, the topic of what we want to talk about today. We have some time together, and I want to make sure that this session, perhaps more than many Zooms that you've done, is going to be highly interactive. You are not just going to be watching me draw on the screen, although I will be doing a lot of that. I'm going to ask you to be doing some drawing as well. So I want to take a moment right now and have everybody who's with us go out and grab a couple of sheets of paper, ideally 4 sheets of paper if you can, steal them from the little printer next to your desk, or take them if you're in the office, run into the copy room. Or of course, if you're someone who works digitally, if you have an iPad or other sort of digital drawing device, that will work out fine. But the idea is each of you is going to need at least 4 sheets of paper, and you're going to need some kind of a pen, because I've done this type of session before, and I know that as much as my talking about things can be interesting, what's even more interesting and has greater impact is when you do it yourself. So as you're grabbing those sheets of paper, let's go ahead and start with our first drawing right now. And just a quick check, Andrea, how is it sounding to you okay? Are you able to hear me and see me okay as we're going?
Yeah, for me, I'm having some technical issues. I can hear you, but again, I can hear them. Like you are breaking up, I'm breaking up. So yeah,
Okay. All right, well,
I
I'll just
don't know
keep
what's going on
rolling.
in here. Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Please do,
Andrea,
please
no
do.
worries. We got it.
Give me a
It's
shot.
going to be okay. That's why we draw. Okay, so what I want everybody to do is take your first sheet of paper and draw along with me. So I'm going to draw on my digital sheet, and I want you to do the same on your actual piece of paper. What I want you to do is just draw a little dot on the top center of your sheet of paper. And from that dot, I want you to make a big circle. And I want that circle to cover as much of your sheet of paper as it can. And you're only going to draw one circle, but you're going to keep drawing it. That is to say, you're going to keep drawing that circle, keep your pen going. And as you keep it going, you're going to notice that your circle will start to round itself out. And if you're someone who's never drawn or haven't drawn since you were a little kid, it might be a little bit more challenging, but you'll notice that you can keep going. The other thing I'd like you to notice is that you can keep drawing even as you're listening to me, which is quite interesting. It shows us that our sense of vision and our sense of hearing, although related, are not directly operating in concert all the time. So you can kind of multitask a little bit in between these different senses. So you can stop now. And then since this is our warm-up drawing, I want you to put your pen back on that top sheet of top of your sheet of paper. And now draw along the circle, but going the other direction now. So if you were going clockwise, I now want you to go anti-clockwise. And what you're drawing is a warm-up drawing, of course, but it's also, you can stop drawing now. What you have just beautifully drawn is a highly accurate and very well articulated schematic diagram of the human brain. I want you to imagine that that circle represents the 100 billion neurons that make up your brain. And what I want us to think about for a moment is what percent of those 100 billion neurons are there to help us process vision, to help us process sight. I'm going to show you right now. So starting again with your pen at the top of your circle, I want you to draw a line down to the middle, and then as best as you can, divide your circle up into 3 more or less equal sections. It starts to look like a Mercedes-Benz logo. And then what I want you to do is fill in 1/3. We're going to talk about this a little bit more, but in terms of sheer data processing, it's estimated now by the cognitive scientists that about 1/3 of your entire brain is there to help you process vision. More of the human brain is dedicated to processing vision than any other thing that we do. And that's going to become very, very important to us because although we think in pictures, and this is uniform to well over 97% of people on the planet, when we are communicating, we're rarely intentionally using this vast part of our brain. We're over here and we're using language and we're using some storytelling and we're using some memory and maybe we're using some numbers, all of which occupy just this 1/3 part of our brain. We want to be able to loop in as much as we can. So that's why we focus on visuals. Our agenda today is I want to talk very quickly about the science and art of visual storytelling. Then, secondly, I'm going to introduce to you a simple sketching tool. That's why you need that sheet of paper. A simple sketching tool that you can use to unpack any idea that you have in your mind and communicate that idea clearly to someone else through the power of simple pictures. And then for most of the time that we spend, I'm actually going to have you use that little tool that I'm going to share with you in a moment and use it as a way to actually draw a story of your own. And so one of the things that I'm going to need you to do is be thinking of a story about yourself, whether it's about your business or about your life, that you think is important and it is valuable for you to clarify for yourself or perhaps to share with someone else. Why is that important? Because we have a bit of a magic trick in our mind, and that magic trick is what we call the power of vision. And I'm going to share with you just a little bit, how does this work and how can we take advantage of it? Essentially, as I say, about 97% of people on the planet, for the most part, we are walking, talking, vision processing machines. More of our brain is dedicated to processing vision than anything else that we do. And you all know that from the moment that you wake up in the morning. It is your sense of vision, for the most part, that's telling you, what does the weather look outside? What clothes should I wear? Which direction am I going? You don't need to read that. You can just look at it. Your visual mind knows what to do. And as we go through our day, we often see that there are things that are very interesting or very attractive or perhaps grotesque, what have you. But by virtue of being visually compelling, we pay attention to them. And then we also know that as we go through our day, that our sense of vision is so important to us that if we see something that's unexpected or really captures our attention, it will so capture our attention that it will distract us from almost anything else that we do. Why does this matter? Is for those of us that intend to be better communicators, it tells us something. If you can lead with people's eyes, and I'll explain what this means by virtue of drawing, their minds will follow. And here, let me give you an example. Let's say today that I wanted to talk to you about this particular product, and I'll draw it with a little box. And I want to say, we're going to talk about this. But then I change my mind and I say, no, I'm not interested in that box. What I'm really interested in is this outcome that's over here. So I want you to look at that. And then what's really fascinating, I might say, is there's a process that takes us from this particular box over to that idea. And that might involve 3 steps. And there's a step 1, and there's a step 2, and there's a step 3. And what we want to focus on today is this step number 2. Now, I want you to notice what I'm doing, and I want you to notice your brain's response. By virtue of me saying, look here, process this way, as long as I keep marking up the screen, I essentially have your attention completely captured. That is the power of our visual mind. Now, I want to show you not only how we might use very simple little drawings like stick figures or little stars or little icons, some of the things that I'm drawing, but how we might be able to have those appeal to someone else's vision in the purpose and the outcome of telling a story. So the story I want you to think about today. I don't really want the rest of the session to be about me. I want you to imagine that the story is really about you. So today, what I want you to do is think of a story that you'd like to tell about yourself, perhaps something about your work. Andrea told me that many of you are business leaders or entrepreneurs, so perhaps you'd like to share something that's going on at work, or perhaps you'd like to talk about something that's going on in your life. Now, to be fair, because of the limited amount of time that we have today, I'm not going to ask you to show those drawings, share those drawings with each other. If we were in a longer workshop, I would absolutely insist that everybody share their drawings with each other. We won't have time for that today. The benefit to you means I do want you to draw this picture with me. We're going to go through it over the next few minutes. But if you want to make it something deeply personal that you don't want to share, but you think it's important for you to clarify for yourself, today that's okay, because we're not going to be sharing our drawings with each other. But that doesn't excuse you from doing it, because to get the impact of today's session, you're going to need to take those sheets of paper and draw. Because part of it is, I'd like you to think of someone else who eventually you might like to share your story with and why it might matter to them. The power of visual storytelling doesn't just clarify for ourselves what's going on in our mind in here, but it also gives us the ability to then share that idea with someone else in a way that they will understand it as well. So the question becomes, first, we're going to clarify for ourselves, but you're going to need to think about someone else that you might want to share it with. And make sure that this story is something that is very important to you. We're going to use our time in a very intense way this morning, and I want to make sure that it's worth your while. So if you want to tell a simple story about the last vacation you took, that's excellent. If you want to tell a story about a relationship that you have that's challenging, that's beautiful. If you want to talk about a business challenge that you're facing, that's fantastic as well. Because in all cases, you know what's really cool? You know what's really interesting? Vision is a predictable process. At a neurobiological, chemical level, what's happening with our sense of vision is a process. It's almost like an engineering process. It's highly elaborate, but over time, cognitive scientists, behavioral scientists, neurobiologists, we are coming to have an understanding of how vision works. And what's really interesting about it is vision, that is, this idea of light coming in to our eyes, activating our brain, and helping us think and take action, is a process that is understandable. And we can break it down into essentially 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 distinct steps or distinct pathways that take place as light enters our eyes and becomes meaning in our mind, meaning such that we can make a decision, have some understanding, or take action. Now, rather than my walking you through the science of all 6 of these, instead, I'm going to have you draw them. And what we're going to be drawing, don't do anything now because we're going to do this in a structured way, is we're going to be drawing some simple little portraits or icons. We're going to be drawing a very simple little chart. We're going to draw a very simple map. We're going to draw a simple timeline, a very simple flow chart, and something that we're going to call a visual equation. You'll see that at the end. And what we're going to find is that by drawing these simple 6 pictures, we will have unpacked essentially every way there is for our mind to conceive of this story or this idea that we seek to share. And we can do that entire process of drawing it in about 12 minutes. By the way, the process of light coming into our eyes and turning into meaning takes about 1/10 of a second. So our brain is constantly 1/10 of a second behind the actual world in front of us, which is interesting to note, but 1/10 of a second for vision to work is estimated to be somewhere around 60,000 times faster than the process it takes to do the same thing in words. So even though vision, depending on your outlook, is very slow or very fast, it's vastly faster than the same time of processing that we try to do with words, which is why we love vision so much. And I want to give you a very, very quick example of how this 6 steps of vision informs a business drawing that I was able to do for a client a couple of years ago. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk for a few moments about coffee. Now, I'm in San Francisco. It's fairly early in the morning here in California. The weather outside is beautiful, and I've already had my cup of coffee, but I know for many of you, depending on where you are, whether in your UK or Europe or Asia, wherever you may be, it may be a different time of day. I can't give you a cup of coffee to help you stay awake, but at least we can talk about it. So I want to introduce you to a man named Pat O'Day, who's the CEO of a coffee company. I'm going to tell you which one in a moment. So if you think about coffee, I'm going to ask you a question, and every one of you already knows the answer. You don't need to overthink it. The answer is very simple. If you think about some place, a coffee shop into which you might go to buy a cup of coffee, and you think about that coffee shop as a store whose history has been dedicated to coffee, can you guess the number one coffee store retailer on the planet in terms of number of stores? Yes, if you said Starbucks, you are right. Starbucks is the number one retail coffee shop by sheer size on the planet. Would you like to guess how many stores Starbucks has? It has about 27,000 stores around the world. Starbucks is number one in terms of number of stores. A few years ago, I want you to ask yourselves who might have been number two. I'm going to give you the answer right now. A couple of years ago, number two in terms of sheer number of stores was another company headquartered here in San Francisco, but beginning to become more multinational, is a smaller company called Peet's Coffee and Tea, and they're number two. Do you want to know how many stores they had at the biggest size they were? About 270 stores. That's number two. Can you think of any other industry on earth where the market leader is literally 2 orders of magnitude bigger than number two? Why does this matter? Because that gentleman I showed you a moment ago, Pat, was the CEO of this company called Peet's, and it was a publicly traded company on the New York Stock Exchange. And investors were coming to Pat and saying, look, why are you so small relative to Starbucks? You need to invest and you need to have a strategy for growth. But Pat had a response. Peet's is historically a much longer existing company than Starbucks. And in fact, Starbucks, some 45 years ago, grew out of Peet's Coffee. Starbucks started as a Peet's Coffee chain. It's quite interesting, a little bit of the history of how that worked. So Pat said, I can't become a Starbucks because then I will lose the people who are so passionate about the coffee we made. So Pat reached out to me. I'd just written my book called The Back of the Napkin. And he said, Dan, I run a coffee chain. I have a lot of napkins. I want to draw on a napkin the strategy of my company so that when people come and say to me, how are you going to grow? I can show them my growth plan. And here's what we drew. This is literally the Peet's Coffee and Tea business strategy on the back of a napkin. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit more and I'm going to walk you through what this visual story tells us. The vision of our company of Peet's Coffee is to always be the gold standard, the number one best cup of coffee that you can have anywhere on the planet. That is our goal. So our mission becomes to build the biggest base of customers we can who believe in what we mean by quality coffee. Quality is our number one point. That might not be true of others, but for us it is. But in order to do that, structurally, we are going to divide our business up into 4 different operating groups. One will be the serve group. These are the people that you meet, the baristas who are making you your cup of coffee. A second group will be the manage group. These are the people who are actually responsible for managing the stores on a daily, monthly, quarterly basis, are responsible for the funds and making sure that things remain profitable. Then we have a third group, which is called develop, which is essentially human resources or learning and development, whose job is to make sure that these people know where they sit and how to deliver on this quality chain. And the fourth group will be the inspire group. This is leadership, whose job is to make sure that they're inspiring everybody else within the organization and our global customer base to make sure that they are inspired by our vision. And then if you look towards the bottom of the napkin, you'll see that we will achieve this mission with every cup by having a set of different success measures for each one of those 4 operating groups. And if someone said, oh, can you tell me in more detail? I want to be in the manage group. How does that impact the business? You then open up the napkin, and inside you'll see that if you want to be in the manage group, these are the 4 criteria by which you will be judged. These are the measures that we have, and these are the tools that we have available for you. With that simple drawing on the back of a napkin, Pat was able to sell the entire company, which is what his goal had been all along, for almost $1 billion US, which was much over what the actual trading price was, to a private equity company, initially out of Germany, who was making their own play for global coffee. And so Pat was able to sell his company, a wild success, because of the excellent product they offer and because he said he was able to tell the story with a simple drawing on the back of a napkin. Isn't that remarkable? So how can you apply this approach to your own story? There's a tool, I promise, that we're going to be talking about today, and we're going to call it the visual decoder. And I'm going to show you exactly how to make a visual decoder here in just a couple of minutes, and then I'm going to use it as the tool by which you will tell us your visual story, similar to what you just saw for Peet's Coffee. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to give you an example of using the visual decoder to tell you a business story. It's going to take me about 3 minutes to get through it, and then we're going to shift and I'm going to have you do the same thing, which will take about 12 minutes. So Andrea, in terms of timekeeping, I've got probably about another 15 to 18 minutes of content that I've got that I'm going to be able to share. So I hope that aligns perfectly. Excellent. So I'm going to share with you using a visual decoder, which I'm going to draw live, a business story from my own recent past. So here's what it is. A visual decoder is simply a folded sheet of paper on which I draw a series of drawings in a very specific order. So I'm going to walk you through mine. My visual decoder, I'm going to tell you about something that I call online meeting magic, radically better remote presentations. This is my latest business offering, by the way. So in my visual decoder, I drew a series of pictures in order, and they went like this. And I started with who and what am I talking about? So I want us to imagine who's going to benefit from what I'm working on. All of us have now, thanks to 4 years ago almost, COVID coming in, whether we wanted to be online presenters or not, all of us suddenly became online presenters, which meant that all of our audiences were online as well, which made some people very unhappy. It put some people to sleep. Many people in our audiences were distracted, and many people were just very confused. So my idea is for any of us who see ourselves in this drawing, and it's a bit of a toolkit. It's a set of tools, online meeting magic, that's going to help this person more effectively connect to those people. So if I were to draw a little map that shows how these pieces fit together, it might look something like this. Here's me, or any of us, sitting at our computer, hoping to prepare and then deliver an effective online presentation. And then we've got an audience that's sitting over here. And what we want to be able to do is use these tools to more effectively communicate with that group of people so that they're no longer distracted nor falling asleep. So within this toolkit, there's a set of tools that I will be using while I'm creating my presentation, and another set of tools that I will be using while I'm actually making my presentation. But let's quantify this for a moment, because every good business person says, well, I like your idea, but can you quantify it for me? How much money is that going to make? How much time is that going to take? What kind of KPIs is that going to impact? How would I measure the success of what you're promising me? So now we draw a different kind of a picture. I'm going to draw a little bit of a chart that helps us see numbers. And in the chart that I'm going to draw, it tells a simple little story. Let's say that there's a presentation that begins here. And over time, I'm trying to convey information to an audience. But what I'm going to show on the vertical scale initially is the amount of attention that I have from the audience. So once the presentation starts, I have everybody's attention. But as the presentation goes on, their attention drops off until I say, oops, we're almost done, or here's how much money you're going to be paid, at which point everybody's attention comes back on again. The problem is, since theoretically I had valuable content to deliver, as people's attention was dropping off, their retention of the information was dropping off as well, and it never came back. So that's the problem as I see it. But what would happen if we could start with higher attention and maintain that attention all the way through the presentation, and in fact increase that attention over the time of the presentation? Wouldn't that be remarkable? So how are we going to do that? Well, Online Meeting Magic says for you, the presenter, there are a set of tools that you can use before your presentation that will help you optimize to keep attention high and increasing. During your presentation, there's a set of tools, such as what I'm doing right now, how to mark up on the screen live. And then after your presentation, there's a set of tools that will make sure that you follow up effectively with the people who are with you. So this is really the idea. And if I were to summarize my online meeting magic offering, I'd say the purpose of this is the following. You as an online presenter, plus this simple toolkit, which you can get from my company, will equal vastly higher online audiences, which should make you happier too. That is my entire innovation story about my new product delivered in about 4 minutes using a visual decoder. So now you are going to do the same thing. So how do you make a visual decoder? I'm going to show you right now. As you make your visual decoder, you're going to need to grab one more sheet of paper that you have. And as you do, the first thing we need to do is think about the story that you seek to tell. So once again, I want you to think of a story you'd like to tell about yourself, your work, or your life. And up to this point, I've already told you 2 stories. I told you the story of Pat's coffee business, and I told you the story of my new online meeting magic innovative product. Now, I focused on business, but it didn't have to be. I could have told you about my life. I could have told you about challenges that I have here or there. So this is where it's open to you. Whatever story you'd like to tell, and then think of someone you'd like to share it with and why it might matter to them. Because I want you, as you're drawing your own story, to be thinking who might be an audience for this story, and then make sure that it is something that is important to you, because we're about to spend the next 12 minutes creating your own first visual decoder of your story. Okay, so to start, I want everyone to grab a sheet of paper, and I want you to hold it in landscape format, in wide format like this. And obviously, if you're using a digital device, your iPad or something, what I would like you to do is prepare essentially 4 digital sheets in order that you have ready to go. So the first thing we need to do is take that sheet of paper and fold it in half. And I'm serious now. I really want you to do the origami with me. We're going to make a little visual decoder booklet. So what we've done is we folded it in half from side to side. Now the next thing you do is you fold it again, now from top to bottom, and lightly crease it. Excellent. So now I want you, what you've got is you've got a perfect little booklet that has a front cover, and on the inside it has 4 exactly evenly sized quadrants, and it has a back cover. And now what I need you to do is grab your pen. I'm going to do this where you can see it, and if you need to follow along digitally, you'll be able to see on my screen exactly what I'm doing as well. So what I want you to do with your pen is very small. I want you to write on the top of the front cover the word title. That's simply because once we get started, this is where you're going to write the title of your story. Then I want you to open up your visual decoder, and in the top left corner, I want you to write the word who, 2 words actually, and what. So in the upper left quadrant, who and what. Upper right quadrant, I want you to write very small the word where. Moving down to quadrant number 3, right down here, I want you to write the words how many. In the lower quadrant on the right, quadrant 4, I want you to write the word when. And then on the back cover, I want you to write the word lesson. Okay, so now all of you have created what is essentially a little blank booklet, already labeled and ready to go. And now what we're going to do for the rest of the time that we have for the next 12 minutes is we're going to draw together. So the first thing I need you to do is take about 30 seconds and come up with a title for the story you seek to tell us. And don't worry, it doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be clever. It's just very clear. What is the story that you're seeking to tell us? And you just need to write a little bit of a title just to help you remember what is the story that you're seeking to tell. You can always come back and change the title later, and you probably will as we get in to the drawing. But what I need you to do is write a title. So I'm just going to make one. I'm going to make one up. I'm going to talk about my new business idea. So I want you to write your title in there. All right, we're going to move on and we're going to go quite quickly. I want you to open up your visual decoder. And what we're going to do first is in that who and what section, we're going to draw, and you're already a little bit warmed up, some very simple little icons or smiley faces or stick figures. If you can draw this and write this underneath it, you're perfect. If you can draw something like this, and write something like that, that's all you need. Because here's what I need you to do. I'm going to start a timer in this quadrant right here for the next 2 minutes. And all you have is 2 minutes. I want you to super quickly draw 3 or 4 people who are involved in your story. Don't overthink it. You're going to draw yourself. You're going to draw your partner. You're going to draw your client. You're going to draw your customer. I don't want you to overthink it. You have 2 minutes total. Who is in this story with you? Who should be in this story? Maybe part of the problem is you're missing someone in the story. And then add 1 or 2 things that are involved. Oh, I have a product. I have a service. Label them. Words are quite fine. So in this quadrant, in 2 minutes, that's what you're going to do. I'll be silent for the first minute. I'm starting the timer right now. And then for the second minute, I'm going to come in and give you a little voiceover, but I want to give you 1 minute of quiet as you're working on your own little drawing. Okay, with 1 minute left, I'm going to give you a little bit of a voiceover. So if you're struggling, what I want you to think about is drawing the simplest little picture you can, or even just writing a list. But what I want us to think about before we get very elaborate in our story is just to think, who are the characters in the story that I'm seeking to tell? If you think about every novel you've ever written, every movie you've ever watched, every letter you've ever read, one of the central parts is, who is it about? Well, it turns out that part of our visual system, when I was telling you earlier that it's a process, one of the very, very first things that happens when we open our eyes and our brain begins to process the images that are coming in is we identify the people and the objects that we're seeing. And so all we're doing at this stage of our visual decoder is not trying to unpack anything complicated, just say, who are the characters who are involved in this story? And what are some of the physical objects that I might see that are included in my story? If I'm telling a story about a car, I draw a car. If I'm telling a story about a business, I might try to draw my product. So time's up. We've completed quadrant number 1. We're going to move along very quickly. We're going to move on to quadrant 2, and we're going to draw a very different picture now. We're about to draw a map. It shows location, not the objects, but where are they located. So you might want to draw some kind of a Venn diagram, the intersection of 3 of those groups of people or 3 different concepts. You might choose to draw an actual geographic map. That's fine. You might draw some kind of simple schematic diagram. Many of you may choose to draw kind of a mind map. What is the conceptual relationship of many of my ideas? Are they in the same place or are they moved apart? So what I want you to do for the next 2 minutes is in the where quadrant, I want you to draw a little map. So here's what you need to do. Draw a map illustrating where those people and things that you drew in quadrant number 1, where do they overlap and intersect today? Show then in the same drawing, if you want to, how they might move around to have the situation change. So I'm not going to say much more. You have some maps that are here. I'm going to be quiet for a moment. I want you to do your best at thinking, how would I draw a picture that shows the relationship of those people and ideas as they exist at a particular time? So just do your very best for the next minute on starting your map, and then I'll come in and give you some more tips. Andrea, while people are drawing for the next 40 seconds, do you want to do a quick audio check? How are you doing on your side?
Dan, sorry, did you ask me a question?
Yeah, oh, great. Your audio is working perfectly.
Is it better now? Am I still breaking up?
No, it's good. It's fantastic.
I've
Awesome.
been trying, Dan, to follow your content while sorting out the mess that was going on from a technological perspective. But fingers crossed. Let's see for later for the
Oh,
Q&A.
this is awesome. Perfect. Okay, so Andrea, just to check in with you, I'm going to go for about another 10, 12 minutes, and then I'll wrap it up, which should leave us, if we do this properly, maybe 8 or 9 minutes for Q&A, okay?
Perfect.
All right. So with 1 minute to go in your map, everyone who's drawing in quadrant number 2, let me give you a little bit of thoughts about why we're drawing this map. So the idea here is one of the most important parts of our visual system is understanding the relationships, the physical positions, and the overlaps of the objects that we've identified. So in our first quadrant, we said, oh, I'm talking about me, my product, my partner, my customer. That's just a list, a visual list of people who make up this story. But now is my opportunity in my map to show the relationship to each other. Am I as close to my customer as I might be, or am I very far removed? Is my product in the right section for where my customer needs to be? Or if I'm talking about something personal, am I and my partner literally or figuratively in the same place? Or are we in completely different places? That's what we were drawing in our map. Time's up. We're going to move on. And you can see this is fast paced. And we'll talk a little bit when we're done about why it is so aggressively paced. We're now going to share a completely different drawing. What I want you to think about now, we've drawn some stick figures, we've drawn a map. I now want you to draw a chart. You might choose to draw a kind of a bar chart. That's great. Many business people are good with bar charts. You might draw some kind of a pie chart. All a chart is a way to visually show number or visually quantify. And we know that in life, as in business, the ability to give things number and measure them can be critically important. So we're going to change how we think about our story now as we move into quadrant number 3, the how many quadrant. For the next 2 minutes, what I want you to think about is what could you measure in your story? And it could be very specific. I could measure money, or I could measure time, or it could be something more conceptual. I could perhaps try to measure happiness, or measure positivity, or measure sadness. Whatever it is, what I want you to do is draw a chart or two that illustrate how you might quantify or measure it, an important value in your story, in particular over time. In your story, is your happiness increasing? Are your costs going up or down? Are the number of people that you're impacting growing or shrinking? Whatever it might be, that's up to you, but I need you to draw a chart for the next 2 minutes. As always, I'll be quiet for the first minute, and then I'll come in and give a little bit of voiceover. With about a minute to go, not to distract you, I want to share with you a little bit of a story. Hopefully you can continue to work on your charts as I share with you. Why is this third drawing, the chart, so important? I've drawn all my life. Some people do that. Many people give up on the drawing. I want to make it very clear that the importance of the drawing in the service of telling a story has nothing to do with art. The quality of your drawing and how accurate or how beautifully articulated it is in terms of looking right isn't important. All that matters is it clear? So what we're really striving for is the idea of being clear. So I moved into the business world, and I would find that I could tell a story, or many people would, but someone would invariably say, well, how can you account for that? How can you measure that? How can you prove what you're saying is true? I have a set of data. How can you show me how that data intersects with your idea? This drawing, this chart, is the very important acknowledgement that the ability to measure and quantify is critical for our ability to prove our thinking or to test ideas out. That's why we emphasize in the third position, the chart. Time's up. We have essentially one more drawing to do. And this one's going to be very easy. What we've done so far is we talked about objects, We talked about their position. We talked about their quantity. Now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about when. We're going to draw a picture of the sequence of things that happen in our story. So what I mean is I'm going to ask you now to draw a timeline, and you might choose to draw a very classic timeline like from a school textbook where you have a series of years and then you have a series of events or characters that are moving over those years. That's fine. You might want to draw something that looks more like a process map. This is step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and then it repeats. You might want to draw something that's more of just a simple life cycle. This happens and then that happens. Swim lanes, multiple parallel timelines, what have you. So the quest is as follows. In this fourth quadrant, in the next 2 minutes, I'm going to ask you to draw a timeline that illustrates 4 to 5 steps required to get the change in your story moving. So essentially, what we want is a timeline of this is the first thing that happened, or I'd like to have happen, then this will happen, and keep going until you have something that looks like a successful temporary conclusion to this act in your story. So I'll be quiet again for the next minute, and then we'll talk about it. So in this case, most likely what we're going to see is a series of connected arrows, perhaps with some labels or diagrams under each one, or something a little bit more elaborate, but that's what we're looking for. Okay, with just over a minute to go, I'll do a little bit of light voiceover. Hopefully, again, not distracting you from the timeline, but maybe giving you a little bit more context. Typically, when someone asks us to tell a story, in particular in the business world, explain to me how your product operates. What we have a tendency to do is start talking about process. We say, well, this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens, and that happens, which is great, but it's not very compelling. It's very rare that someone truly cares about the process. What they care about is the story. Why is the one thing happening with that character over there that's sitting in that position that then moves them to interact with a different character in a different position? And what is the measure of that outcome? That's really, if you break it down academically, what a story is about. You have a character who has a desire to achieve an objective, but there's a roadblock in front of that objective, but there's some sort of enabler that helps you get past that roadblock. And through a series of steps, you can bypass that roadblock by using that enabler, that concept or that tool or that method to get the objective that you sought. That's all any story ever really tells, whether it's Harry Potter or whether it's a business story. What we've just done with our fourth quadrant is map out the plot line of the story we seek to tell based on the characters we've already met in the positions and quantities we've already uncovered. Time's up. Last one. I want you to fold your visual decoder together. You've completed, and give yourselves a pat on the back because you're awesome for having done it, the 4 critical drawings exploring really the 6 different ways that our visual mind parses information. And now on the back, what I want you to do in the next 2 minutes, and this is going to wrap this piece up, and then I'll turn it over to you, Andrea. In the next 2 minutes, I want you to write down or draw, either way, or both, what is the most important idea that you want us to remember from everything else that you explored in your story. What is, as we say, the big takeaway, or what is the lesson or the moral of the story, or the most critical single idea that you want people to remember? I want you to write it or draw it right here. If you don't know what it would be, look over your visual decoder because the answer is already in what you've drawn. Okay, starting the clock right now. As always, I'll be quiet for a minute, and then we'll talk a little bit for the second minute of your drawing. All right, with just over a minute to go, I will begin to wrap up what we've done here. So as I've had this time to spend with you, I've tried to weave together a number of ideas. And just in summary, the first one would be use your eyes as a way to better understand the world and share that world with other people. It's a powerful lesson. How would we do that? Well, we just borrow from the science of how vision works. We know enough to know that our visual system breaks the world down into these discrete concepts. What am I looking at? How many are there? Where are they located? What series of events unfolds as I continue to watch or monitor them? And what lesson can I learn? And when we seek to tell our visual story, we don't need to do anything particularly fancy. We just play back in exactly that order, exactly that same series of visual concepts. And one of the simplest ways to do it is draw. And this visual decoder serves as a very simple little paper product that you can take with you in your mind into any meeting. When someone starts to elaborate a really complicated idea, you might say, wait a minute, that's great. But here on the whiteboard or on my sheet of paper, can we just start with who are we talking about? Where are they located? How many are there, or how many would we like there to be? And we end with a simple visual summary of this is the most important idea from this story. And believe it or not, everything that we just described, it took us 12 minutes to do in our visual decoder, 2 minutes each for 6 drawings, takes 1/10 of a second for our visual mind to do. And we do that hundreds of thousands of times every minute, which is exactly why so much of our mental capacity is dedicated to processing vision. So what I'd like you to do with your visual decoder, we don't have time to share them with each other today, but what I'd like you to do is take that visual decoder and sometime later today, perhaps tomorrow, perhaps late next week, find someone who you think would be interested in your story, or more importantly, who you think you need to share your story more clearly with, and ask them to sit down for 6 minutes and share with them your visual decoder and see if that doesn't help clarify your story. You use your visual decoder to help yourself think more clearly about your own idea, to convert perhaps something that's very, very complicated into something that's clear. You then have your visual decoder to share it with someone else. If you need to give a presentation, you can use your visual decoder as a way to practice. Just share your visual decoder with yourself in the mirror a couple of times until you become very comfortable with the essential ideas that you have to share. And when it's time to share someone your grand vision, as Pat did around coffee, you have your visual decoder to become the core tool by which you share your idea. Listen, I wanted to share with you, Andrea, that brings us to a conclusion for my prepared remarks. If anybody's interested in how I work or wants to participate, all my tools are available on Napkin Academy. Also, Andrea is going to share with you, most of my videos are available for free on YouTube. For those who want to join me on a regular basis, Napkin Academy is available, and I've given a coupon code, which Andrea is going to talk about, to give all of you a discount if you'd like to for signing up for what I call the Black Belt lesson, our Master Visual Storytelling lesson. But Andrea, that brings me to the end of what I had to share. Many more ideas, but I'd be open to anyone having any questions or any further thoughts, Andrea, that you want to talk about.
Dan, thank you so much. And I'm going to step in only if I'm not breaking up. So, how's the sound? Can you hear me well,
It's
Dan?
beautiful. It sounds perfect.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. Sometimes technology gets in the way. Was it what kind of law, that very famous law? If something,
Murphy's Law.
Murphy's law, if something can go wrong, most likely it will go wrong. And but anyway, so thank you very much, Dan, for your presentation. So for everybody, I've included a few links in the chat. Check them out. We don't have time to discuss them in detail, but the first one, the virtual goodie bag, you've got access to free resources and discounts and promotions from our supporting partners for this event, including the Black Belt Academy package that Dan mentioned, with a discount just for you for being part of the Ideas on Stage community. Now, we have 5 minutes for a couple of questions. So if anybody has any questions, please type them in the chat, and then I'm going to take them. As you think about your first question, Dan, I do have a question for you, which is this. How do you deal with people, particularly in business, who think that drawing visualization in general is not a serious tool. This is
Yeah, it's a
done. This
great
is not.
question.
It's not serious. It's for kids, isn't it? What do you say?
Oh, well, it is a question I get all the time. And the way that I typically respond, Andrea, is to say, yes, I hear you, I understand. But I go back to the idea of drawing that quick picture, as I've done before, saying, do you know that when we talk about visuals, we're talking about more of our human brain than any other thing? And then if we really want to have an impact and we really want to share with someone the clarity of our idea, activating the visual mind is the most important thing we can do. And the best way to do that is to just sketch live. And after a couple of moments, everybody will come around to that way of thinking. I think one of the questions that's embedded in what you asked me, Andrea, is this notion that it's not professional. And that's fine. But the real good way to think about it is if you're going to go into a highly professional setting and your expectation is that a hand-drawn picture is not going to be perceived as professional enough, that's exactly the same as the analogy of saying, I'm going to go to this meeting wearing a t-shirt and cut-off shorts and a baseball cap. What I mean by that is it's up to you to know your audience well enough to know what is their level of tolerance for professional. So if someone is going to react badly by hand drawing, which could happen, then you do the drawing in advance and then you hire someone, find someone, or use PowerPoint or whatever tool you like to clean it up and make the drawing more professional. But invariably, what I have found is when you are willing to draw, someone's rejection of that disappears very quickly when they realize that you are not being patronizing, but in fact, you actually know your subject so well that you are confident enough to go to the whiteboard or the sheet of paper and draw it live. And that's when people really see the value. Andrea, does that make sense?
It does make a lot of sense. And we have time for maybe one, potentially two more questions. One question is from Jens. What digital tool are you using? And I guess
Okay.
the question refers to what you've been using today.
Okay, Jens, it's a great question. So I'm on a Surface Pro, Microsoft, doesn't matter. I could also be doing this on an iPad equally well. The software that I'm using is probably the real question that you're asking about. I'm just using standard PowerPoint. And here, this is typically when I do a session, one of the most important practical lessons. People say, but you can't draw in PowerPoint. Yes, you can. And I'm going to prove it to you right now. Do you see on my screen in the lower corner? Let me prove it to
Sorry,
you.
Dan, can you start sharing again? I think again
Oh, I
something.
stopped sharing. Let me share again. There we go. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So you'll notice that everything I've shared with you today is just PowerPoint. And here it is. Here's the entire presentation that I just shared with you in PowerPoint right here. And when I wanted to draw, all I do is I go into presentation mode and move your mouse over the lower left corner, which you can see here. And one of the items that you're going to see is a pen. And you just click that pen. And now, whether with your mouse or in my case, because I have a Surface, I have a digital pencil, but it doesn't matter. I could be doing this with my mouse. I have the ability to draw. I can draw anything that I want. I can circle text. I have also the option to just do a highlighter. So if I really want to, I can share this is what's most important. And so this is every version of PowerPoint that you have used for the last 15 years. And nobody knows that the drawing tools are embedded, which because it's silly marketing on the part of one of my favorite clients, Microsoft. And I've communicated to them so many times. If you would more effectively communicate to people, some of the best digital drawing tools are already in PowerPoint, which has a 90% installed base globally of a shared tool. We can do all of our shared whiteboarding and drawing literally within PowerPoint itself. I find that pretty valuable.
Dan, there's we're going a bit long, but I think there's one we do have time for one more question, which is useful. It's very practical. It allows you to clarify something from a technical perspective as well, and it's connected to the last question. Now, the question is from Johan, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. She's saying, what if you are far away from your computer? So at the moment we are doing this online, so you are there, you can use your tool, your Surface Pro, whatever it is. How do you go about doing these illustrations if you are not close enough to your computer? Any ideas?
Well, I don't know if Johan means close enough, meaning I'm several meters away from my computer, or if I don't have my computer at all. Here's what I would respond, Johan, it's a great question. When we're doing a meeting remote, we have this beautiful ability to share on a digital surface. So in that case, just get closer to your computer. But if the issue is my computer, I don't have access to it, well, that's why we have whiteboards. And so my favorite thing in the whole world is most of the time when I'm working with someone, here, I'll stop sharing now so you can see this. I have this whiteboard sitting behind me, and this is actually notes from a client meeting that I was doing. So often I will say, well, let's just do a quick summary of what's happened today. This is me over here, and I was using my Surface Pro with my PowerPoint. And thank you to Andrea, who's over here, who's using your own technology. We were able to share with all of you this information and convey it both back and forward. And so, Johan, to answer your question, you have kind of three options. Option one is just go ahead and use a whiteboard or a sheet of paper if you're in the room with people. Option two, if the room is too big, go ahead and just bring your laptop with you up onto the stage, connect your laptop to the projector, and then just draw on the screen of your computer, and what you're showing will appear on the screen for everyone else. And option three is, again, just to be able to use our PC or our Mac, as we're doing now. Just take over the screen in PowerPoint on a Zoom and draw directly on it. I hope that helps.
I'm sure it does, Dan. And there are a few other questions, but I want to respect people's time. So I don't want to go long. And everybody will receive a follow-up email with, again, additional resources, including the ones that Dan mentioned. And I think that the reason why I asked you, Dan, to be here, and this is for everybody, the conversation we had a few months ago on the Ideas on Stage podcast, the insights, the ideas that you shared in that conversation and today as well, even changed I'm a presentation coach myself, but your ideas changed the way I go about presenting and communicating my ideas. And for everybody, I think that Dan's ideas are a game changer. If you want to become a more confident presenter, more effective communicator in general, then yes, there are tools and technology, but what really makes a difference, what really differentiates great communicators great communicators from average communicators is whether or not you follow the fundamental principles of communication. And Dan's principles, Dan's ideas are fundamental principles of communication that will always work. They worked in the past, they work today, and they will work in the future as well. So, Dan, thank you very much again. I appreciate you, your work, appreciate you taking the time, waking up relatively early, even if you told me that you like to wake up early anyway. And thanks to everybody for attending this session. I do hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it useful. You're going to receive the recording as well. For now, let's keep in touch. All the very best. Ciao.
Thank you all.